Hi, this is my review of Fat of the Lamb. This is an adventure for the Demon Gate role-playing game. If you haven't seen my review of the core rulebook, I'm going to put a playlist of my Demon Gate reviews in the description of this video, so I recommend that you check them out. Fat of the Lamb is a very disturbing adventure. It's an adventure featuring harsh conditions of survival and cannibalism. This review is going to contain spoilers, so keep that in mind. Now let's talk about the quality of the PDF. My major criticism of the quality is that there are typos. Even on the back of the book, there is an error of spacing. Now when it comes to the graphic design, it's pretty good. It's the same graphic style that you see in other Demon Gate products. You also have great organization, great writing. Everything is very clear, very well explained. You have a hyperlinked table of contents, your bookmarks, so it's very easy to move through the entire document. You also have great illustrations that fit the theme of the adventure. Some of them are slightly gory, so everything makes sense with the entire theme of the adventure. So the quality in general is pretty decent. Now let's talk about the contents. First, you get a bit of fiction. This connects directly with the theme, with the story of the adventure. You have this character known as Nervig Hall. He is basically an entrepreneur. He noticed this inhospitable and potentially deadly region, and he decided that putting an outpost there could be quite profitable because there are no outposts in many miles around the area where he wants to build this outpost. He's going to be the sole supplier for that zone. So the player characters are people that he hired to build this outpost. It's quite interesting to note that this adventure connects directly with the Forever Winter Saga. That is, that apocalyptic event that happens during the Slaves to Fate adventure. If you haven't seen my review of Slaves to Fate, remember that you can find it in the playlist that I put in the description. And in that adventure is where this apocalyptic winter starts. So this is a perfect continuation of that major event, but you can also play it as a standalone adventure. So like I said, Nervig Hall wants to build this outpost. You have information on his physical and psychological condition, and you also have information on several other non-player characters, which are the most important ones, or the ones that the player characters will probably interact with more throughout the course of this dangerous endeavor. So you have Gruff the Brewer, which is a short but thickly muscled man with a wide nose. Though his ale is not particularly of high quality, he is eager to share it cheaply and for a little coin, or even a good laugh. There's also Brynjolf the Butcher, who has one eye and wears a black eye patch over the left side of his face. If asked how he lost it and how he got that horrible scar beneath his left eye, he simply says, "My knife slipped." And there's also Granny Bobkins. This is a very important character for the adventure. She is a kind old woman. She gives wise advice sometimes. She is also willing to help the player characters with her potions and poultices. So she is supposed to connect with the player characters to create a sort of strong link with them, because later on something will happen that will potentially influence the decisions of the non-player characters in a very important way. So everything proceeds normally. You will have some opportunities to interact with the different non-player characters. Like I mentioned, here you only have information on 6 major non-player characters, but there are supposed to be many people working on the building of this outpost. So the player characters can interact with them, they can carry out different skill checks to better build this outpost. I think this section of the adventure is perfect to introduce some other minor encounters. Maybe the player characters need to defend the outpost and its builders from some beast or monster that came from the wilderness. So after they finish building the outpost, they will be celebrating, they will have this feast, there will be drinking, dancing, storytelling. But then tragedy will happen. There's going to be a fire. The entire outpost is going to burn after all of that hard work. So now the player characters are faced with a tough decision. Should they focus on saving resources such as food and tools, or should they focus on rescuing survivors? Because even if they rescue survivors, if they do not rescue enough food and tools, it's going to be useless. They will die. Maybe they want to focus on rescuing both survivors and resources, but maybe they will fall short, maybe they will fail to rescue enough survivors or enough tools and food, so it's not an easy choice. They will have to make use of all of their skills during this dangerous section of the adventure, and once the entire havoc of the fire ends, they are facing a very difficult challenge ahead, surviving. Because of the terrible winter, of the harsh conditions, it is quite impossible for anyone to leave the outpost into the wilderness and try to seek help or seek refuge elsewhere. So people are going to start to feel great hunger. They will potentially starve because of the food. Most of it has been lost in the fire. So this is all about the characters, talking with the non-player characters, creating alliances. Sometimes enmities will happen. People are going to get quite desperate and potentially insane because of the hunger. Many opportunities to exercise leadership, barter skills, to keep away mental afflictions, to carry out hunting expeditions will happen through the entire adventure. But like I said, alliances and enmities are going to start to take shape. This is a moment in which mini factions will happen within the group of survivors. Eventually, Granny Bobkins is going to disappear. She is missing, and when the player characters decide to look for her, or maybe through some other unrelated activity, the player characters will discover that many non-player characters have killed Granny Bobkins and they are eating her. They are now cannibals. So now the player characters are faced with an aberrant choice. Should they join the cannibals and survive the winter by eating all of the other survivors? Or should they protect the survivors that are still alive and fight against these morally deplorable cannibals? Because this is not a question of that somebody died and you take advantage of the corpse by eating the body. These cannibals are focused on killing the survivors and eating. So it is going to be all-out war, with some survivors trying to protect themselves and those that are their friends or at least their allies, while other survivors are focused on killing the other survivors and eating them. It's going to be a very savage and nightmarish situation. It's a very complex social affair. There's going to be backstabbing, there's going to be diplomacy, negotiation, and of course there's going to be fight inevitably. Many of the non-player characters here are desperate to survive and they will listen to no reason. Perhaps at the end of the struggle only the player characters will survive. Or if they were strategic and tactical enough, maybe they will get to rescue other non-player characters. Regardless, there will be a somewhat merciful pause in the terrible weather, and the characters will be able to make it through towards the nearest safe area, perhaps another outpost or a town or village, but they may end up with some permanent physical and mental scars. So overall, what do I think of Fat of the Lamb? This is probably the most unique Demon Gate adventure that I have seen so far, because it focuses a lot on social situations. Because of the awesome powers and abilities that you have with the character classes and the species and the races, Demon Gate is a role-playing game that is begging for you to play it as a dangerous expedition into dungeons, forests, mountains, etc., castles. But here, this is all about surviving. This is all about staying alive and not degenerating before the face of adversity. This is quite heavy on controversial themes. I think this is going to test the player characters mentally more than anything. I would recommend that you use this adventure module between two combat heavy modules, because that way this is going to remind the players that Demon Gate is a role-playing game that can handle all sorts of scenarios, and that way there's going to be a nice balance with an adventure perhaps focusing on a dangerous forest expedition. If you are playing Slaves to Fate, it will be perfect to use that before Fat of the Lamb. Fat of the Lamb effectively works as a great sequel, because the ones of you that saw the review or played the adventure know that the adventurers end up in a very precarious, unstable social position. So it's logical that they would accept to work under Nervig Hwal to get some money, because they are probably not very well off after the entire affair of Slaves to Fate. And after this heavy psychological horror type of adventure that is Fat of the Lamb, it's great to introduce something more standard as a sort of respite to a more normal type of slaughtering, that is fighting against enemies that were enemies from the start and not non-player characters that you were friends with or allies with a few days ago and suddenly they became these murderous cannibals. because that's the great shock value of this adventure. You had these non-player characters that were working with you, you were surviving with them, you were drinking with them, and suddenly they are wild beasts out to eat you. So overall, I highly recommend Fat of the Lamb. As some final criticisms or improvements, I would have preferred it if there were more combat encounters against, like I told you, with wild beasts, because here you only have details on the final confrontation with the cannibals. I would have liked it if they added some encounters with different monsters and beasts that came from outside of the outpost. That would have been nice. I think that will also create some stronger attachment with the outpost and the people within it. If you are running this adventure, I highly recommend that you come up with some encounters in which the player characters have to defend the outpost as it is being built or after it has been built, and protecting non-player characters, because it's going to be quite horrifying if the people that they were protecting suddenly become their worst nightmares. So keeping all of that in mind, I highly recommend Fat of the Lamb. Well, thank you for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that have been sending Drive-Thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.